Welcome everyone to Deliver 2024. My name is Nathan Keller. I'll be your moderator today in the Innovation Theatre. This is a new format. I'm very excited to see how this format works out. It's very different, but very exciting. Our first presentation today, I'm very proud to welcome to the stage Mark Richardson, CEO of Ocado Intelligent Automation. Today he's going to be discussing around intelligent automation in warehouses and taking us through the amazing things that Ocado is doing. Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. I need a clicker. This video clip behind me is of a warehouse near to London with 3,000 robots on the top of its grid in its cubic OSRS. It's capable of outputting 1.7 million individually picked and packed items every single day. And this warehouse is also near London. It's smaller, 600 robots on top of the grid. But in this warehouse, 25% of all of the output is picked robotically. And that percentage grows every single day. You might be thinking, okay, well, what's a grid with 3,000 robots and robotic picking got to do with me? But here today, we're going to talk about future-proofing operations through automation. And in the future, your logistics operation as well will most likely also be done by robots. So I'm Mark Richardson. I'm CEO of Ocado Intelligent Automation. And I am wondering if some of the challenges that Ocado faced over the last 23 years might be some of the challenges that you are currently facing in your own logistics operation. For us, because we grew up in grocery, those challenges included not squashing the bread, not breaking the eggs, and not allowing the milk to sour. Today, Ocado is a world leader, a global world leader in both grocery e-commerce and advanced warehouse technology. We overcame a great many challenges in order to create a way of doing grocery e-commerce scalably and profitably. And our systems pick more than 2 billion individual items annually for our partners around the world. As for me, my background is in technology. I ran the Ocado technology function for 10 years. I was COO of Ocado Group for 10 years. I also managed the teams of engineers that created the first version of our MHE. And now I am doing this role, making all of this technology available to people outside of grocery for the first time. This is what I'd like to talk about today. I want to start with a little bit of history about Ocado and how Ocado solved some of the problems that it encountered. And during that part of the talk, I'd like to try and tell you as many of the lessons that we learned as I can and provide as many insights as I can that might help you in your own organization. And then when we move on to future-proofing, I want to really talk about ambition. I want to talk about ambition as it applies to projects involving automation and how that ambition plays into a strategy for future-proofing your operations. So, Ocado, as you may know, started life in the UK as a grocery e-commerce, a pure-play grocery e-commerce retailer. We never intended to have shops. It was always going to be groceries delivered from a central warehouse. Now, grocery is a tough business, right? It's a tough business without the e-commerce element. It's a very tough business with e-commerce. The margins are relatively small. The competition is fantastically tuned to get the very, very best out of its operation. It is a problem that the product itself is not robust, right? It's often squashable. Sorry, I'm just scratching my microphone here with my stubble. It is often squashable, perishable, doesn't last very long. It also requires you to store it in multiple temperature regimes. And so grocery is a very, very hard challenge. On the other hand, it's extremely big, right? The prize is truly enormous. Grocery is at least half of all retail anywhere in the world. From the outset, we decided to tackle some of the challenges of doing grocery e-commerce by automating. Automating mechanically inside our warehouses and automating algorithmically on the delivery routes and out on the streets of the UK. It's fair to say that our first attempts at automation were not successful. Automation tends to deliver, it delivers some results reliably and other results unreliably. And one of the results it delivers unreliably, in my experience, is a very productive operation for you. Even when the machinery does exactly what the vendor told you it would do, sometimes your operation doesn't respond in the way that you hoped, and you don't end up with a highly productive logistics operation the way you hoped you would. And there are many reasons for that, I think. One of them is that your logistics operation is quite a lot more complicated than just the machinery that you bought to help you improve productivity. In Ocado's case, one of the things that we noticed quite quickly is that none of the vendors of the equipment were also using that equipment in their own complex logistics operations. None of them had the challenges of the difficulty of hiring staff or the difficulty of teaching staff how to use the automation. None of them actually was really in any position to help us solve our business challenges beyond simply delivering their equipment. So in Ocado, we tried a lot of automation over our 20-year history. The very first attempt was, I have to say, a complete disaster. It's not clear to me now whether the equipment was bad, whether our warehouse design was bad, or whether actually we just weren't capable of managing the complexity that we had created. Nevertheless, it didn't work at all well. We knew we were not going to deliver on our promise, and so we actually scrapped the first lot of automation completely in less than 2 years after we deployed it. The second time around, we tried to learn from what we had experienced in the first 2 years, and we optimized everything. We bought a lot more automation. We optimized for individual asset types, individual product types. We had many, many families of different automation all stitched together inside our warehouse. It worked pretty well, but it had single points of failure, and we were learning a harsh lesson about old-fashioned manufacturing facilities where nothing really proceeds any faster than the slowest single step in the warehouse. Our second attempt was much better. In our second attempt, we took out some of the complexity. We took out some of the families of automation and reduced down to just two storage assets for all of our stock. But even in that version of Ocado's automation, we still had complexity that was difficult to manage. We still had traffic jams in our warehouse. We still had congestion that was chaotic in its behavior and hard to solve. And so one of our key insights was to try to fold some of that complexity into some new automation, and that's how the Ocado storage and retrieval system was born. So the OSRS is a game changer in terms of its speed to deploy, in terms of its modularity. It is fantastically dense storage. Because it grew up in grocery, it's very, very fast and it drives extremely high productivity. But it also pulls off another magic trick for Ocado, which is that the complexity that it represents is all inside the product. It's all inside the mechanisms and the software. And on the outside, it presents a very simple face to the Ocado operation, and that makes the outcomes more predictable because it means it's easier for our teams to manage. Now, Ocado has deployed that MHE around the world for some of the world's largest retailers. So the OSRS enabled us to transform our company as well. And we are in all of these places with very major warehouse installations, hundreds or thousands of robots in each one. But also, during this period, we developed a large technology team. And so we are in 10 different R&D centers in 8 different countries around the world. Our technology team is unusually capable. That technology team continues to invest a huge amount in future-proofing and R&D for the next generations of our equipment. And we are engaged in extending the automation upstream and downstream of the OSRS in order to be able to extend the scope of what we can automate inside of a warehouse. We, from time to time, make strategic acquisitions. So 3 years ago, we acquired Kindred Systems, and their technology now forms a central part of the robotic picking that we're going to talk about later. 6 River Systems we bought almost 1 year ago, and 6 River Systems Chuck Assisted Picking AMR is a fantastic solution for people who are not yet ready for full-scale automation or large CapEx automation. It's a fantastic way of improving the productivity in a more traditional warehouse with a relatively small commitment, but extreme flexibility and a low infrastructure footprint. We are relentlessly improving the product because we use the product ourselves. So our own operation benefits from and suffers from all of our successes and failures in making this kit better. Here's just some examples of some of the more recent innovations that we have come up with. So to choose a few at random, we are in the process of launching a new generation of grid that's much lighter to deploy and much faster to deploy. Our robots, the newest generation of our robots, are now 50% printed, 3D printed with additive technology that's quite groundbreaking. We have a battery swap capability now that means our robots don't spend time at the edge of the grid charging anymore. They're there for 60 seconds while we swap out their battery and then we charge off the grid. Bins seem, like old technology, right? But Ocado has recently introduced a steel bin. And the steel bin provides almost perfect fire safety in your warehouse. And last of all, I guess I'll mention robotic pick. Robotic pick is transforming the productivity that you can achieve in one of our warehouses. The best of our warehouses at the moment achieves an all-in site productivity of more than 230 units per hour. So that's just units shipped divided by the total human labor in the warehouse, including inbound and all other operations. That 230 is headed towards 330 or even 350 with the addition of robotic picking. So I hope I've painted a picture of Ocado as, I guess, both an inventor of and vendor of automation, but also a customer of a wider set of automation and an operator of its own automation. And I'm sort of hoping that the things that I and my colleagues have learned over the last 23 years might be of some use to you. So let's see. Here are some questions I think that you could ask yourselves when you are thinking strategically about plans to automate, or indeed whether to automate. The first one is a bit of a no-brainer, I think. Right? Is your storage as dense as it could be? Dense storage is a fantastic gift that supply chain and logistics directors can give to their organizations, because once you have invested in it forever going forward, you will require less and less land and smaller buildings in which to do your business. And so there is an ongoing real estate benefit to your organization that will last forever once you move to ultra-dense storage. Connected with the density of storage is a question about where you can deploy your operations. So how many of you have customers who want their product from you faster than they used to want it? Right. Well, using something like the OSRS, you can deploy at a tiny scale. You can deploy in dense urban areas, very, very close to customers, if your customers live in dense urban areas. And you can do that and still accommodate a very large range of product, because a multi-SKU storage bins in an ultra-dense storage cube can be deployed at any scale, even in the tightest of locations, can deliver to your customers, in the case of Ocado, within minutes of those customers placing an order. Imagine also if you could replenish those small, dense urban facilities with bespoke picked replenishment bins from your larger facilities, and that you could deliver them several times a day, even in the same storage asset that you're using in the large facility and the small facility. In fact, not only that, but you can also run the exact same operation in your large DC facilities and in the tiny urban centers that you've built close to your customers, because this automation is deployable at any scale. Can you scale to meet the challenging demands without increasing your labor needs? I guess what I'm talking about here is modularity. Having done a project, can you increase the amount of automation later as your business grows? And have you in some ways boxed yourself off with your automation? Often you create automation in a warehouse and now it's set. It's very difficult to add to it in the future. A modular solution like Ocado's OSRS is very, very easy to deploy at the scale that you want now and then add to later. And that kind of flexibility is something I think you should think about, whether you're thinking about Ocado or not, when you think about automating your own operations in the future. A typical automated warehouse might last 20 years. Just try to imagine what scale your own organization might be at in 20 years' time. The top one of these questions, I think, might be one of the most important ones in my list. I meet companies all of the time who tell me that their operations are running at below maximum capacity. And it's got nothing to do with demand. It's got nothing to do with poor processes or poor management. It's entirely to do with the fact that they can't hire enough labor to run the warehouses at full capacity. This is a problem that I would say is growing, right? Around the world, you will definitely have noticed, even if you don't encounter the problem of not being able to hire the labor, you will have noticed that the labor is becoming more expensive, inexorably more expensive. In countries like my own, that process is encouraged and driven by the government, who wants to raise the wages of the people that used to work for very little in our warehouses. Their intention is to raise pay deliberately, and they do that systematically every year by increases in the minimum wage which outstrip inflation. And it's becoming harder and harder to run a logistics operation economically. Against that challenge, just imagine, right, where that process might lead in another 10 or 20 years. And ask yourself, what am I doing? What is my organization doing strategically in order to prepare for that coming, let's say, that continuing trend? The middle bullet point here is a bit of a shameless plug. Are you building your infrastructure with a technology partner who runs an operation of their own? I think this is, obviously, most of you buy technology, if you buy automation at all, you buy it from people who do not run an operation of their own. And I would encourage you just to think about that a little bit, right? Are you working with somebody who understands your problems at a kind of deep level, who has roughly the same problems, and who has genuine skin in the game because their entire business is dependent on the success of all this automation and software as well? And then the last one, I suppose, is often, I think, a hidden factor that lots of people don't consider. I often tell the teams inside Ocado that our job is to manage complexity. Manage complexity so that our customers do not have to manage complexity. Now, the difference between some of the early warehouses that Ocado built, which use a much more traditional, let's say, amalgam of different technologies, and the warehouses that are equipped with a large cubic OSRS, one of the biggest differences is simplicity. Those large cubic OSRSs, they only do a few simple things. The warehouse is not full of lots and lots of different operations. It's very easy for the management teams to understand, and it makes it more likely that the management team is capable of getting a good result out of all of the automation. So I would encourage all of you, when you're thinking about automation, has this made my organization more complicated or less complicated? At some level, automation provides one reliable form of simplicity, and that is it should reduce the number of people in your organization. And increasing the number of people definitely increases the complexity of your operation and makes it less and less likely that you can predict accurately the outcomes for that operation. How about this? Are you resilient and predictable in your operations? Now, I think resilience is fairly well understood by people who manage logistics, in my experience. But imagine, in the case of a big cubic OSRS, tens or hundreds or even thousands of identical robots, completely fungible. Every robot can do any task that you set for it. In there are no single points of failure. It is a massively parallelized operation inside the grid. It's also extremely predictable because automation tends not to make bad judgment calls, right? And so you should get a good result over and over again. If you get a good result on day one, you'll get a good result on day two. There are less judgment calls and mistakes from the people who work in your operations. Does the MHE inherently improve security? I think automation in general is good for security, right? ASRSs in particular tend to be good for security because the product tends to be not human accessible. Cubic ASRSs are a special case of this because the storage is incredibly dense. There's no way for anyone to access the product in the middle of a grid. Even the engineering team can't get to the product in the middle of the grid. And in addition, I suppose, if you move away from just thinking about theft and security, if you think about those metal bins that I mentioned earlier, the metal bins provide another kind of security, a security against the fire risk in your warehouse. Ocado knows about fire risk. We had a major fire in one of our warehouses. It caused us to start a project in which we spent millions and millions of dollars working with our insurers in order to provide a solution that we thought was the absolute best in class. I'm not sure what that bong meant, but I'm sure it signifies something. It's quite ominous. All right, we'll carry on. If you imagine your products stored inside steel bins and stacked on top of those steel bins are more steel bins, effectively sealing the product inside hundreds of thousands of individual steel boxes. And the level of de-risking that has provided is enormous in terms of fire safety and fire risk. Does your solution push accuracy and service levels and KPIs for your customers? So I guess I've already alluded to this. I think automation in general is good for accuracy. It's good for predictability, and therefore it's good for the quality of the service that you provide to your customers. And it achieves that usually by removing the human element, by removing the mistakes, by removing the judgment calls. In the case of Ocado, for instance, our robotic picking is an improvement in terms of accuracy over our human picking. Right, I'll try and ignore that. So the robotic picking can do one thing that the human picking doesn't do. If I ask someone to pick 6 boxes of chocolate biscuits, the human picker is tempted to pick up a batch of chocolate biscuits and then scan them 6 times and put them in my bin. But they might have picked up 5, or they might have picked up 7. The robotic picking picks them up one at a time and scans them individually, and it always picks precisely the right amount. There is no way for it to make a mistake. And if it doesn't scan the product, it knows it hasn't picked it up, and it tries again. And then I guess what I would say here, the last of these, and which is actually my favorite one, is just to talk a little bit about whether you're working towards a lights out operation. Lights out operation is a term that's bandied around quite a lot, and probably many of you have in mind that it's not really an achievable goal. And I would agree with you now, in most scenarios, it's not an achievable goal. What it is, though, It is a very, very useful guiding star. Because what's not an achievable goal now, you just have to remember that that is a temporary situation. The trends in the labor market will continue, and your ability to hire people cheaply to come and work in your warehouses will get worse. And so having in your mind, when you make decisions about automation, does this one day lead towards lights out? Can I imagine automating this process and then later automating other processes? It's an extremely useful strategic tool in order to help you choose the right technology. And Ocado, by the way, does not achieve a lights out operation. We still have a lot of people working in our warehouses, but we are inexorably removing those people from the warehouse. And I don't feel bad about removing those people from the warehouse because those people increasingly don't want to work in my warehouse anyway. So I'm going to summarize and wrap up here. I would say we are at the start of a new era of automation, in my view. Previously, automation projects were really about a balance between the capex and the project risk versus the potential productivity gain and headcount saving. But increasingly, I would say automation projects are about the only way of ensuring that your business can continue to grow long into the future. Remember, we're talking about future-proofing here. A special example of that happens inside my own organization is because we started life in grocery, part of our product obviously needs storing in a deep freeze. Just ask yourself, who wants to work at minus 25 degrees Celsius? I can tell you that it has become increasingly difficult to persuade people to work in a minus 25 degrees Celsius environment over the years. So much so that Ocado has now created a version of its OSRS that works at minus 25 degrees Celsius, so that the people doing the picking can work outside of the cube in a balmy 2 or 3 degrees Celsius. That's just a special case of something that is a trend, right? The workforce of yesteryear increasingly is looking to earn its living some other way than working in your warehouses. As for my own organization, Ocado Intelligent Automation, so we're a very unusual mix of operations and technology, and our experience and knowledge goes deep and wide. We invest and have invested quite a lot more than most in advanced warehouse technology. And we retain, because of our operational links, we retain a laser-like focus on driving productivity to the absolute max. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and invite any questions that you might have. Hello, Nathan.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. That was excellent. Any audience questions would you like to pose to Mark in regards to his presentation? No? I'll kick it off. I'll get it going. So you mentioned it during that it's obviously the first automation project 2 years in, scrapped. Obviously, big move to do that. When you were sort of doing that as a business, most companies won't do that. Most companies will stick by their decision. What was the thought process, obviously, in regards to taking that type of step?
It's a good question. I agree with you. It was a very, very big step. So if you imagine Ocado had decided to go into the grocery e-commerce business and decided to do it without stores. So we were building an automated warehouse. So if the automated warehouse didn't work, Ocado didn't work. It was as simple as that. And I sort of, to expand on that a little bit, that commercial imperative to make the automated warehouse work has informed Ocado over 2 decades, because even after we took the bold step of scrapping the automation we couldn't make work, even after that, for another 10 years, every minute of every day was spent making sure that we had perfected the warehouse operation. Yeah. And no stone was left unturned because our commercial survival depended on it.
Excellent. Any questions? No? Yes, over here. There we go.
Hello, my name is Bassem from Ahold Delhaize.
Hi.
Hi. I have a question for you. So you mentioned earlier about the scarcity of basically workers for distribution centers and whatnot.
Right.
In large organizations, business cases are still handled a lot of times in more traditional manners. How do you deal with reflecting this problem in a more numbers-based business case format, in a sense of not just checking the wages of the current workforce or the workforce in 1 or 2 years, but more, yeah, in 5 years or 10 years, we might not have anyone wanting to work in those sites?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. In my mind, we do two things, right? Or everyone should do two things. One is you should just ask the people who are currently responsible for hiring in your organization how they feel about needing as many people as you think you're going to need in 5 or 10 years' time, right? In most cases, what I think you'll hear back at the moment is, blimey, that sounds really, really tough. The other thing that I think is very much worth doing is to dangle a carrot, right? I honestly encounter many people who are responsible for large logistics operations who I don't think actually have a sense of what could be achievable, right? If I'm running a logistics operation and I'm struggling to fill it with people, and automation, maybe it's on my mind, maybe it isn't, depending on the kind of the capex available in my organization. The degree to which I might look to automation to solve my problems slightly depends on how confident I am that it would deliver a good result. Would it take 20% out of my workforce, right? Which maybe the Chuck solution from 6 River Systems that Ocado now owns might take 20. I'm making this number up, by the way. Might take 20% out of your workforce. But what if I could show you automation that would halve your workforce, or even take 75% of the people out of your workforce? If I could show people that operation and show them the size of the prize, I think they would wake up and think, okay, maybe I'm not going to deploy it today, but my strategic thinking needs to move to not shaving the workforce, but radically transforming the workforce over the next 5 or 10 years. There you go. That's my answer.
There's another question over there.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Bart. I work for a fashion retailer.
Hi.
So I'm just curious, what kind of products can you store in your solution?
Okay. Well, anything that fits in the bin actually is the short answer. So if we think about the OSRS for a minute, the only rule is that it has to fit in the bin. And in the Ocado grocery operation, absolutely every single product fits inside the bin. And that's true for every single one of our retail partners around the world. So in all those warehouses that we built so far, we only build a grid. We decant every single product at inbound into the grid. We don't make, nothing is stored on pallets in any of those operations. When we look outside of grocery, we imagine scenarios in which we would leave some product on pallets and replenish the grid. And we also imagine scenarios in which some products will not fit in the bin. And so then the question is, what do you do with the products that don't fit in the bin? And then, of course, you do need a second process. And as it happens, we have a fantastic picking system in Chuck from 6 River Systems for dealing with products that don't fit inside the bin. Chuck, if you've not seen it, automatically navigates its way around a picking aisle. It stops in front of the product that needs picking. It goes fast, so it makes the picker walk fast behind them. And you can put products that won't fit in our bin on a Chuck trolley, and it will take them to outbound. We're actually extending that technology at the moment to provide a platform for picking onto a pallet as well, so you can pick really, really big items that won't fit in a bin.
Amazing. Any other questions? Down the back there.
Hi.
We're crossing streams. We're into the...
Sounds like Ghostbusters.
We're into the middle stream.
Yeah, you're in all places. Quick question. What about the fire security in these storage solutions? Because we have sprinklers, we have water that needs to flow. How is that accepted with these kind of solutions?
Look, that's a very, very good question. the nature of these very dense storage cubes is, well, there are two big risks here. One is the bins often are made of plastic, and that's combustible. And two, they're quite hard to access the grids should a fire begin. Ocado has thought about this very, very hard. So first off, if I deal with one aspect of fire safety, so if we deploy an all-plastic bin solution, which we still do deploy, then we create fire breaks inside the grid to make sure that any fires that did start are contained to a small island of plastic bins. And we do extensive testing with our insurance partner, FM Global, to make sure that fires can be constrained into these small islands should they occur. The sprinklers themselves then are usually aligned with the fire break pattern in the grid, and they do a very, very good job of making sure the fire can't spread. But Ocado actually can offer 2 levels of additional security. We can get back all of that, or even 3. We can get back all of that storage that we've given up to to fire breaks by filling in the fire breaks with bins made of steel. And bins made of steel work at least as well as a gap in stopping the fire from spreading. Another level is that we can deploy a slightly more than 50-50 mix of steel to plastic bins, in which we surround tiny islands of plastic bins with islands of steel bins. And this means any kind of fire that did start in a warehouse would be very, very small indeed, because the island of plastic is really constrained to just a few stacks of bins. And then for people who perhaps want to go the safest route of all, we can deploy an all-metal bin solution. And in all metal bins, you don't even need the quality of sprinklers that you need in the plastic bin solutions, because it is almost impossible for a fire bigger than 1 bin to ever start inside the grid.
Excellent. Question over here. Sorry, mate. Question? There.
Hi, Mateusz from Morele, from
Hello.
Poland. I have a little question. There are 2 similar solutions, competing solutions, and they appear in the same time, and there is always a lot of rumor who was first, how it was, and so it's an engineering question to the engineer, how it was at the beginning.
I'm not going to get drawn on something that you may know has been the subject of a very major litigation between the 2 organizations, which is completely resolved at this point. And I suppose what I would say is there are no restrictions on Ocado as a result of any of that. And there is no ongoing dispute between our 2 organizations at all.
Excellent. And any further questions? Okay, I'll pose you one. We've got a bit of time. So I came from sort of logistics, working with e-commerce. Obviously, the e-commerce evolved. There was a lot of technology. There was a lot of time spent turning bricks and mortar into e-commerce pure plays.
Right.
Ocado's come from pure play back into the logistics side. How did you find, is that driven your innovation? Because there wasn't a lot of technology going that way. There was a lot more in the opposite direction. So do you feel that sort of drove your innovation? Because now you're working with people like Coles in Australia who were completely bricks and mortar, and now they're coming to you for automation.
It's very interesting working with bricks and mortar partners, all right, as you say, having come entirely from an automation background. And I suppose it's almost certain that during the course of the last few years, Ocado has probably missed a few tricks that bricks and mortar retailers have known for a very long time that we never got a chance to learn. But I suppose Ocado has always had quite a purist view, focused on an end game. And the purist view focused on the end game goes something like this. It is inevitable that over time, solutions that provide higher productivity will win out, right? Because in the long run, why would anybody spend more money than they need to in their operation? There may be all kinds of tactical, personal, or financial reasons why people don't buy advanced automation now. But eventually everybody will, right? And I believe that in the same way that I believe and have believed for 20 years, that if someone offers you a product delivered to your door in a short lead time with almost guaranteed accuracy, you will elect to have it delivered to you rather than go to a store and pick it up yourself. It just makes economic sense that you will do that, and over time, almost everyone in the world who can afford to will do that. And I feel the same way about automation. And so in our discussions with the bricks and mortar retailers, Ocado is usually relatively strong on its position on automation, right? You can't fight economics. It's coming. You're going to want it. If you don't do it, well, your competitors are going to do it anyway. And so, yeah, it is a real North Star for us that automate everything eventually.
Yep, excellent. Excellent. Any further questions? Yep, just in the middle here.
Hi, this is Marcel from Herbalife. What is the biggest challenge with automation at this moment of time, and how do you think to tackle that one in the upcoming 2 to 5 years?
Wow, that's a good question. I guess you could be asking me about the biggest challenge with selling automation. So that we can dispense with relatively quickly, I suppose. I mean, there is still, logistics departments tend to get a second go at the budget after front of house. And so there are lots of organizations who would rather spend money on selling than on logistics. And so being able to present, as I mentioned before, a sufficiently attractive case that transforms productivity sufficiently for it to become top of the pile rather than halfway down the pile. That's a challenge for me and my team and for other automation vendors around the world. The challenges for automation itself, I think often, I guess I've alluded to this earlier in my talk, automation doesn't always give you what you thought you were going to get. My belief is that you usually do get a machine that does what the vendor said it would do. And that it is possible, at the end of the project, the vendor will have tested that machine and it will go as fast as they said it would. But the point I made earlier, I think, is quite subtle, that you often still are not satisfied at the end with your operation. It's not always true, but it's often true. And that's true because there is more to life than automation. I find myself, it's a bit strange saying that as a vendor of automation, but there is, you need sometimes some special skills and knowledge and a certain approach to your operation in order to maximize the opportunity that the automation afforded you. And that challenge, I think, is how will it get solved? Well, in Ocado's case, it gets solved because we are a major operator, right? There are many very, very large-scale warehouses in the world that Ocado is either running itself or intimately involved with, and we absolutely do know exactly how to get out of our automation the productivity we say you can get. For the rest of the industry, how that gets fixed, I think, is probably through an ongoing simplification of the automation, how it gets deployed, the interfaces, the management reporting, so that a wider set of logistics teams are able to manage it in a way that gets a good result out of it. And I would say some automation is already there. Some of it's fantastic and very simple and easy to get to grips with, and some of it, I think, still has buried inside it complexities that are not obvious to you until you own it, and you try and get the best from it.
Excellent. That'll conclude today. Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Absolutely brilliant.
Thanks, Nathan.
And yes, everyone, that's the end of the first session. Next session starting in around 15 minutes, thereabouts. So get a quick comfort break and then come back.
Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.